why am I doing this? I am an instructional coach. I have a passion for new teachers. I've spent 9 years as an instructional coach in classrooms, helping new teachers to navigate classroom management, lesson planning, and the things associated with getting their credentials. Induction issues, one of them being TPAs. And walking new teachers through TPA has given me the experience to say, I want to help more teachers. So as of January, I became a certified life coach, and I left the classroom and I decided to be full-time online instructional coach to teachers. And this is the first way that I am able to help teachers succeed, is by getting through the spring with the TPAs. So why do we have a TPA? What is it? It's a teacher performance assessment. And the idea of the TPA is to have a performance task that is more than just content-based. We've all had teachers who know a lot about stuff, but have a really difficult time expressing themselves and teaching it to students and getting us engaged in the learning. So the goal of the TPA is to say, how are you as an instructor? Can you take into account the important things that are necessary for classrooms and students to be engaged and succeed in learning? Create a lesson plan, present the lesson, and reflect on the learning that you got. If we only had that much time for every lesson that we did, it would be amazing. If we could reflect on every lesson that we present during the day and really think about what went well and what didn't, we would be superstar teachers. So the idea is incredible. The problem is that it has become so time consuming that it becomes more of a chore than of a reflection of our teaching. So I would like to try to take as much chore out of it as possible. It's not intended to be an off-the-cuff lesson that I record today and then I do my write-up on. It's not intended to be a time to really try new and innovative technologies and lesson plans. I've been seeing a lot of things for the TPA too online about what technology do I use? How do I do that? And in my mind, I'm thinking, if your students don't already know the technology, this could be really challenging because they don't already have the background knowledge that you're gonna want them to have in order to be successful for this project. Ed technology, educational technology, is something that we should be using on a regular basis with our students. And I know that's TPA too, but it's that reflective piece of knowing that we're not going to try a new and innovative strategy. If I've never used a graphic input chart with my students, the first time to do it is not for your TPA. Use things that the kids are regularly familiar with and part of your routines and procedures so that they're not looking at you like, what? And you're like, come on, just do it, just do it. Like, we don't want any of that. All right. The TPA is set up in 4 parts: plan, video, reflect, and apply. The TPA says start with the plan, and I disagree with them. That is going to be my very first tip. If we start with the plan and we just write a lesson plan and we videotape it, what I'm seeing is that lots of teachers go back and have to redo it because they missed something essential. So tip number 1 is know your outcomes first. Be familiar with your assessment guide. We are going to backward map. Any quality lesson planning for a unit takes into account the outcomes before we teach the students. If we start at the beginning of the unit and we teach what the unit shows and we give them the unit test at the end, I don't know about you, but there's many times I've found that I did not teach it the way that it was being assessed. That I didn't teach them the strategy the way that it was going to be assessed, that I missed something important. So we need to know what the assessment outcomes are before we plan our lesson. So what outcomes do you need to know? You need to model how to write a lesson, how to present a lesson, and how you're going to differentiate in that lesson. You need to know who your 3 focus students are. Focus student 1 is an EM. We're going to think about their backgrounds, their culture, their language. How are those assets that you can build on? Focus student number 2 is an IEP or 504 student, someone who is in resource or special ed or has an SST that is being gone through. If you are TK or kinder, this does not necessarily have to be someone in the process or any grade level really, but TK and kinder have the hardest time with these. But it's someone who's going to be referred, has been referred. Those students count. And number 3, focus student 3 is your social emotional needs student who has outside the normal behaviors, struggles at home, homelessness, foster care, bullied, a non-traditional student, all those kind of things fit under there. So we need to know who our students are, what standard we want to choose, and I'll get right with you. What standard we want to choose. And there's been lots of questions I've seen around standards. Can I do this standard? Should I do that standard? We'll talk more about it in a minute, but pick a standard that you feel very comfortable that you can teach and that you can have students do high levels of high order thinking skills. So this is the letter Q. Q says, Qu. That's great, but what are you going to do to make the kids engage with higher level thinking skills? That's much more difficult if you do a phonics lesson, for example. And we need to know the rubrics and outcome. What is it that the assessors are going to assess before we jump in and write our lesson? Anna, I'm going to call on you and then I will show you guys the rubric.
Thanks. My question is regarding the student that has like an IEP or something like that. So I have kindergarten and I do have one student that has an IEP, but she doesn't talk at all. And someone told me, because this student's actually going to special ed next year. So someone told me for your TPA, don't use that student as one of your focus students. So I chose to use a different student that is undiagnosed as ADHD. If I put in my TPA that I have one IEP student, but then the focus student I'm using is not the same student, is that a problem? Or should I put that I have 2 IEP, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if they're going to come back and go, wait a minute, you had an IEP student, but you chose to use this other student.
Right. Can you start that question and we'll discuss it at the end, because I need to think about that. I think that whatever you put in your annotations and your notes and your description, that's what's going to be assessed. So okay. I don't think that that's going to be a problem, but let's talk about that a little more specifically in the Q&A. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so we need to know who our students are. We need to know what the outcomes are, and we need to understand the rubrics and the video requirements. So what they do when you're turning in your TPA is they look at the level 3. And they look for one piece of evidence for each of these sections. If they find a piece of evidence for this one, and then this one, and then this one, they check it off and you get a 3. If they move to the next category, and you also have the things from the 4, then they check that off and you get a 4. And if you go all the way to column 5 and they've got evidence of these things as well, then you get a 5. If anything in the 3 column is missing, then they go backwards to the 2. So understanding what each rubric is looking for is important, right? So when we get to writing the lesson plan piece, I would take out the rubric and say, do I have piece by piece by piece? Okay. All right. Before I move on, are there questions, comments, bingos, anything in the chat that you want to put there?
Where do we find the rubrics?
They are in the assessment guide. And that is found in your portal when you signed up for the assessment. Awesome, thank you. Molly, is that how you say it?
Yes, that's correct.
It's beautiful. All right, then I'm going to move on. Every lesson needs to be thought about for your 3 focus students, and you're going to be picking strategies that help engage students in learning. The higher order thinking skills, those are the ones that students are going to get engagement, collaboration, differentiation, right? A good solid question that asks kids to think and share their responses and agree and disagree with one another. Those are great things to watch on an assessment, right? They're great things to watch in a classroom. Kids just really having an opportunity to express themselves at their level. So I just found some verbs that you guys can write down or think about that might be helpful when you're trying to think of strategies to use in the body section of your lesson. If you want to just take a picture of it, go ahead. All right, so you see things like inferring, making connections, making models. Does anyone have anything a strategy that pops out to them that they like to use in their classroom with their students that you would like to share with us in the chat so that we can make a list and keep track of some of the strategies that we might consider using when we're writing our lesson? Ooh, connections. Thank you, Karen. I notice, I wonder, I think applications to the real world. I don't know about any of your schools, but if they use AVID strategies, philosophical chairs, any kind of think, pair, share, especially when you take it to the next level of explain why, or I agree because, or disagree because, all of those conversation starters, those are big deal ones. Using manipulatives in math, I believe every grade level, every student should be given opportunities to make models and use concrete models and manipulatives. Seeing kids compare their strategies, being able to think what's going to happen if I change this number. Those kind of thinking strategies are great higher level thinking strategies. All right, so think about who are my 3 focus students. I'm going to be making accommodations, scaffolds, differentiations to my lesson to help them engage with grade level standards. What are the rubric expectations and what are the video expectations? right? We haven't written a lesson plan yet because we don't want to start our lesson plan till we know what they want to see. The assessors can only score what they can see and what you tell them with your writing, what they can see and what they can read. If you want them to interpret your video a certain way, you describe it the way you want them to interpret it. You want them to see the two students in the front who are working collaboratively, even though those ones in the back are not. You focus their attention on the students in the front when you do your annotations, right? So they can only score what they can see and what they can read. If it says explain, explain it, right? If it says show examples, show examples. If it says cite evidence, then you go back and say, in my lesson plan, I planned for students to work collaboratively in groups. As you can see in the video, at 20 seconds, 14 of the students are working collaboratively on their project and they're having great conversation about X, Y, and Z, okay? Do what the prompt asks, but they can only see what they can only score what they can see and what they can read. Any questions? Any confusions? I can't see everyone's faces. That's the hardest part about virtual teaching. Okay. So the videos determine everything. You are doing an assessment. Give them what they want. You don't have to have a circus going on. You just need to have the very specific things that they're looking for, okay? So they want an introduction. They want the engagement in the student collaboration, critical thinking, and they want to see how you're monitoring and assessing. So in your introduction, you need to create a safe learning environment, connect to prior knowledge, have a clear objective. 5 minutes. So don't make this a big deal. Boys and girls, I'm so glad you're here today, or we've had such a great day, or I'm looking forward to this lesson. We get to enjoy our time together. All that things, just a couple of sentences that build that safe learning environment. If you need to review your rules or expectations for the kind of lesson that you're going to do. Today, we're going to be doing a collaborative lesson. In collaboration, remember that we keep our voices at a voice level 1 or 2, whatever your thing is. We stay seated in our seat. We get help from our neighbor. You know, if you want to do something like that, that also fits there. Today, we are going to learn how to add fractions with unlike denominators. Remember that the denominator is the number at the bottom and the numerator is the number on the top. We're going to be doing that. Let's try a getting started question on the board, right? 5 minutes. So we're not going to make it super fancy, no elephants and lions, just your normal, very direct to the point kind of things. Video 2. You got 5 minutes to model for them in the video differentiation and higher level thinking, right? So your lesson might be longer, but when you're doing your lesson plan, you're going to want to think about, how do I put that really good together? My hint is, if it's something that needs to be done outside of the video, like reading the story aloud to students ahead of time, do that the day before. Give them background knowledge the day before or earlier in the day or a different part so that you can focus on the piece that you want to be videoing. right? That's the part you're going to want to script out, be really thinking about, make sure you've made notes on. So any of that other stuff, I would just make sure that I gave it in advance. So we read the story of Cinderella yesterday, or this week we've read multiple multicultural Cinderella stories. And today we're going to do this interactive collaborative discussion project, whiteboard activity, whatever, to compare the stories, right? We're gonna work on this compare and contrast together. Here's the graphic organizer, here's the essential question, those kind of things, because that's what they're gonna be able to see in the 5 minutes. Okay, the button didn't work. There you go. And then the last part, wrap it up. How are you going to know that the students got the information that you wanted them to get? During any piece of it, you can do informal assessment. The TPA 1 is not about assessment. It is about differentiation, but you need to be able to know if the kids got the lesson, if they understood it, because in the reflection piece, you're going to talk about how you knew what you did well. You're going to talk about what you would change, how you would make sure kids understood it differently, whatever. So how are you going to know that they learned it? And how are you going to tell them what they're going to be doing next? The CTC, I've watched the training videos. I've done this a bunch of times. The CTC does not want to know that you're going to give them a worksheet or go back and do independent work. That last part, what we're going to do next is based on the standard. So there was some struggle, or some students were struggling to understand what we were doing, or something like that. So we're going to reteach it using new strategies. Or, hey, we all are just really getting this. So the next step on this concept is ... That's for your reflective piece later. But know that how are you going to know that they learned it so that you can know what your next steps are? And then there's a couple things in the chat. Let me get to them in just 1 second. With new teachers that I'm working with, I always say script it out. When you have your first observation, script it out. It is okay for you to carry your lesson plan with you anytime. You do not have to be the memorizer of your lesson, but for a situation like this, or a situation like a new teacher observation, even as an experienced teacher, I wanted to know that what the admin was going to see was something I planned well, right? So script it out as much as you need to. The questions you're going to ask, the comments you're going to make, the words you want to say to make sure that you have inviting, safe learning environment, the words you want to say so that you make sure the kids get the objective. Each of those pieces, if that's your style and you can do it, I would script it out. We're all worried right now, especially about classroom management and behavior issues. You do not have to do it full class. You can do this with a small group of students. If you have a prep period, you could do it during your prep. If they're doing independent computer time over there and you want to pull a student group over to the table, you could do it there. You could have them come in at lunch, or you can bribe the heck out of your class. If you're good, for Miss Coleman, you get pizza on Friday. I will bring in candy from Easter for everyone who's really good for the videos while I'm doing them. Extra computer time, extra recess, doesn't have to cost you money. Free playtime in the classroom, depending on your grade level, bribery works. Okay, so I have an 8th grade teaching friend of mine. He has had quite the group this year, and he bribed them with pizza so that he could get his videos, and they did. You know, like, if you've got 1 or 2 super handfuls, beg a colleague. Your colleagues should be respectful enough to let you share a student for a little while so that they don't interrupt your lesson. All right. And parent permission slips, before you get started, you need to start getting those out, because you know getting stuff back from parents is hard. If they are going to be videoed, you think they're going to be on video, get the permission slips out. All right, that's already a lot. Take it in. I'm going to answer a couple of things over here. Okay. I went too far. Now I have to go back down. Okay, I finished my lesson plan and video last year. However, I was told that I would not be able to use it because I needed to add SEL. Is that true? I think, Miss O, that is a very specific question that I'd probably need to talk to you about what you've already done, and if there's some stuff in there that you can just refer to, or if there is some stuff that you need to add. So let's talk about that either at the end or on a one-on-one conversation, if that's all right with you, because there's too many questions I have to ask to know the answer to that. And what do you mean? What do you mean when you say, is it okay? Do you mean pictures of my presentation? Yes, take pictures. Hope you already did. If you need me to go back, I'll show you a slide later. All right, thanks, Priscilla. Does your district or site have a permission slip for photography and video already in their welcome packet? I would use that one, or talk to your admin about what you can do for that. All right. Okie dokie. How does knowing the expectations for the video, I'm looking, Linda, I'll be right there. How does knowing the expectation for videos help you to plan your lesson in a more meaningful way? The TPA says create your lesson first. I argue that you should know the lesson expectations first, the video expectations first. How does knowing the video expectations help you plan more meaningfully? Linda, while people think about that, helps you plan your lesson. Linda, ELA includes language. It's English language arts. So whatever standard you feel comfortable with in that. Rubrics, yes. Linda, you can actually do a science or social studies if you want, and have an English standard that you're focusing on, like academic vocabulary or reading for content understanding, or some sort of categorizing and synthesizing of information. So any of the language arts standards are fine in that sense. Oops, that is not what I wanted to do. Helps you plan your lessons, sets clear goals, focus on what is needed, plan exactly what the assessors are looking for. That is our goal, right? Hit each point. Then, and I love this one, Patty. We don't plan unnecessary stuff. Thank you very much. Fluff, you use the word fluff instead of stuff. But yeah, we don't want to be doing unnecessary stuff. We want to be focused on what is being assessed. Make sure you cover what they're looking for. You guys are awesome students. A+ all around. All right, so we know what they want. We know what they're looking for. Our 3 students, our introduction, our high-level thinking, collaborative, student-centered learning, and how are we going to know that they learned it and what are we doing next? So now I'm going to get to my lesson plan. Tip number 3, don't do more than you have to. Thank you very much for setting that up. Don't do unnecessary fluff, right? You can do 45 minutes of the best lesson of your entire life. They're going to see 15. So which 15 minutes do you want to make awesome? The ones that you're going to record, right? So if I need to do a 15-minute lesson, I don't need to plan a 45-minute lesson. I might plan a 20-minute lesson so I have a little extra wiggle room in there, right? I can record in two ways. One, the way that Keisha does it, because I have no technology skills. How I got an online job boggles my mind. How I've decided to start an online career with technology being like my nemesis. Nemesis, whatever. But you can create your lesson, you're doing your introduction, start video, teach, 5 minutes, video, stop. Set up next video, student engage, student engage, student engage, student engage, walk, talk, check, good job, stop. Or, and then the last piece, stop, right? Or record the whole lesson, go through the video and find your favorite segments and take those out. God bless you. I love you. One of you will have to teach me how to do that because it's not something I know how to do, is remove pieces of video. The CTC recommends the longer video because then you have more to choose from, more to see yourself working so that you can go back and Adobe Rush Premiere. That sounds fancy. So you can go back and say, oh, I did this and I did that, and I could write it in my lesson. In my opinion, if I've scripted out my lesson, I have all that information there. Pretty pen and paper type of girl anyway, so. You can start and stop the video for each segment, 1 minute to 5 minutes, 1 minute to 5 minutes, 1 minute to 5 minutes. But within that 5 minutes, because they're gonna think that you're editing it. So if you go 2 minutes, stop, and then 3 minutes, and then try to add those together, that's not gonna work. But if you don't do a continuous 20 minutes and pull pieces out, that's not what they mean by that. An iMovie, friendly iMovie. My son is good at iMovie. He can break things up. I don't know about how to take those out, but Sarah, a couple of you guys are giving me, Jennifer and Sarah, my people. All right. So don't do more than you have to. We've backward mapped. We know what the video expectations are. And now we are ready to get started, right? So we've talked for a while already about all the background stuff. It feels like it takes forever, but once you know the expectations, which I already told you, now you're ready to start writing. You cannot do your lesson plan until you know who your 3 students are and you've written up your demographic information, because that's going to help you think about what needs does each student have. So my EL is strong listening and speaking, not strong reading and writing. So I need to give a sentence frame, a conversation starter, quote sandwich paragraph frame, some key academic vocabulary. So once you've done the getting to know your students part, you are ready to write your lesson plan. You can choose your own lesson planning template. There's also the page in the packet that gives you their template to use. I've only seen teachers use their template. I think everyone feels comfortable that they fill out the papers they've been given so they know they've done it right. But if you create your own lesson plan, just look at that rubric and make sure you've gotten each of the things in your lesson plan that they're looking for. And then we talked about scripting it out already for comfort while you're teaching and making sure you hit all the key details. To get a 5 on the rubrics, you need to include UDL. And I think people think this is really technical and difficult, but they are the strategies that you are choosing to use to engage all students in the learning, including your differentiation skills. So when you're writing it up, just use the letters UDL. I use UDL strategies such as ... I use UDL strategies such as using manipulatives and multiple models for math and having students discuss why they chose to use the strategy that they did. It's no different than the strategies you were going to choose in the first place. But pointing it out that it's UDL, that tells the assessor, hey, this is a 5. I used UDL. Check it out. All right, any bingos? I haven't seen anybody have a bingo, but I know you're taking notes and you're listening, and some of you are probably drinking your 3rd glass of wine because, yeah. It still has to be done. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, I do not envy this process at all. I like the idea behind it. I just don't like how the government got involved in it. Okay. One of the biggest questions I get asked about are student assets and how do you talk about that? Like, what do I do about that? In older versions of the TPA, we just had to think about student likes, student dislikes. How could I write they're all into Dodgers and so I'm going to do something with baseball. That's not what they're looking for. They want to know how we can include cultural relevancy, student needs. How do we take the assets they bring to us, our IEP, our social emotional needed student, our EL student, and how do we see their needs as assets, right? A student who speaks 2 languages has a lot of assets, even though their academic English vocabulary might be struggling still. So how are we building on the assets or the strengths that they do bring? So I'm gonna give you a minute and look at these couple examples that I put up here because no one wants me to read it to them. Any questions, clarifications on that? We're going to move on to the reflection piece. So we've done backward mapping, knowing our outcomes and goals and the video expectations, lesson planning, including UDL. And then we're going to jump, after we've written it and videoed it, we're going to reflect on it. So if you are ready to move on, I will. I don't see anything in the chat, but okay. So reflection, this is where you're going to go back and reflect on your instruction. Teachers who have reflective practices are much more successful because they know what their students are at, what happened during their lesson, and what they need to do to make sure that they take the students from where they are, either reteach or extend an activity. We do not get given enough time to be reflective practitioners the way that we're supposed to, right? But in this case, take the opportunity. The more practice you have, the more natural it becomes anyway. So give them the evidence that they need. In the video, I did this, you can see. In the lesson, I did this, you can see. Okay? follow the rubrics. Use the prompt in your response. If it, hold on, I have an example here. I carry these TPA papers with me everywhere anymore. Pretty soon I'm gonna have the packet memorized. If it says, explain how you used Focus Student 2's assets. How did knowing Focus Student 2's assets help you with planning your lesson? Then you say, knowing Focus Student 2's assets helped me with my lesson planning because ... You guys remember that from high school and elementary school? Make a complete sentence. That means use the prompt, right? Do it here. This is where you want to do that. This part of the lesson went really well. When I reflected on my video, I noticed that 3 students were not participating. In the future, I will make sure to use equity sticks or call random selection for names so that they need to be more prepared to participate in order to be prepared to respond. That kind of thing. Not just a restatement of what you did, but what you would do differently. That's the reflection piece. I know it's almost 7:30. I'm wrapping this up and then I will stay for Q&A for anyone who wants to. Kind of losing some people, but I get it. It's evening. All right. So you're gonna make some consider and reflect. Okay, here's a couple examples of some reflective writing. I love it, Priscilla. She's like, I don't have to write all this down. I got a phone for that. Yep, Kayla, 1 second. The one I was on or the one I skipped? Because I skipped one on purpose. Kayla, was this the one you wanted? All right, there you go. All right, and then the last section is apply. Apply wants to know, what are you going to do next? How are you going to take the standard to the next level or reteach it? And in TPA 2, you actually have to do the follow-up lesson and video it. TPA 1, no. There's 3 videos: introduction, main lesson, and conclusion of your lesson. But you're going to reflect and think about, all right, students did or did not understand this. What am I going to do to deepen the level of learning or the level of understanding of the students? Okay. Not, I'm going to send them to their desk to do an independent worksheet. That was a big deal. Okay. This is where you cite evidence. What I noticed was that students seem to be struggling. If you see in video 2 at the 2 minutes and 5 seconds, it seems like most students got distracted and off task, and that's probably because they got distracted, okay? And so in order to keep their attention or to make that part easier, they were challenged, they didn't know what to do, whatever, I would do what the next step is, that I'm going to go back and reteach that and use a different strategy. This one, Miss Cortez. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on, and then I'm happy to do a couple more things at the end for people. I just want people to be able to get what they need out of it. Okay, do this. We've talked about all of these things. Stay on topic, use lots of evidence, be clear in your annotations and your descriptions. This is not an off-the-cuff activity. All right. In the chat, while I put up a quick think about checklist, what was your aha moment or bingo moment of today? Video segments. Don't worry about the fluff. I like it. This backward plan. Know the expectations. That I can't tell you. I'm on that EdTPA and TPA page. That's where you guys found me in the first place, I'm sure. The number of people who are asking questions that are the very specific expectations that are in the assessment guide, right? Like it's spelled out there, but I know that's 56 pages of a lot of words. So I get it. Aha, plan out the lesson. Students' assets. They will ask about their assets 15 times. And if you feel like you're repeating yourself over and over and over again, you're doing it right. I don't know why. All right, on your paper, what is your next step? What is your next step when you leave here, besides filling out the survey, because you're going to do that because you love me? What is your next step?